Ateeq Rafiq incident. On March 9, 2018, a routine trip to the movies ended in tragedy at the View Cinema in Star City, Birmingham, UK. A 24-year-old father had just finished watching a film with his wife when he realized his phone and keys were missing. He suspected they had fallen between his seat and the floor. The gold-class seats in the theater were premium recliners, equipped with powered footrests that could be adjusted with the push of a button for maximum comfort. As he knelt down and reached under the seat, the powered footrest began to lower automatically. Within seconds, his head became trapped between the metal mechanism and the floor. The pressure immediately cut off his ability to breathe properly. His wife and theater staff desperately tried to free him, but the electric mechanism wouldn't release. Investigators later discovered a blown fuse in the seat's power system had caused a critical malfunction. The safety features that should have prevented the footrest from applying lethal pressure had failed completely. For nearly 15 minutes, he remained pinned under the crushing weight of the metal footrest as his brain was starved of oxygen. By the time emergency services arrived and managed to dismantle the seat, he had already suffered catastrophic hypoxic brain damage. Paramedics found him in cardiac arrest. He was rushed to Heartland's Hospital where doctors placed him on life support, but the injury was too severe. After a week in intensive care with no signs of recovery, Ateeq Rafiq was pronounced dead on March 16th. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death as catastrophic brain injuries resulting from compression of the neck. Knickerbocker Theater roof collapse incident. On January 28, 1922, Washington, D.C. was experiencing one of the worst blizzards in its history. Snow had been falling heavily for days, accumulating on rooftops across the city. Despite the weather, the Knickerbocker Theater on 18th Street and Columbia Road was packed with nearly 1,000 people that Saturday evening. The audience had gathered to watch the comedy film Get Rich Quick Wallingford in what was considered one of the most elegant movie houses in the district. At precisely 9:10 p.m., as the film played, a strange cracking sound echoed through the theater. Some patrons glanced up toward the ceiling. Moments later, the entire concrete roof collapsed inward without warning. The flat roof had collected over 28 inches of snow, weighing approximately 80 pounds per square foot. The tremendous weight had overcome the structural limits of the building. Hundreds of tons of concrete, steel, and snow crashed down directly onto the seated audience below. The impact was immediate and devastating. Those in the balcony seats were crushed instantly by the falling debris. Others on the main floor were trapped beneath massive concrete slabs. The theater plunged into darkness as electrical lines were severed. Screams filled the air as survivors struggled to escape through the chaos. Emergency responders arrived within minutes but faced a horrific scene. They worked through the night in freezing temperatures, pulling bodies from the rubble. 98 people were killed outright or died shortly after being extracted. Another 133 suffered severe crushing injuries. The weight that had provided them shelter had become the instrument of their death. Marumbi shopping, cinema shooting incident. On November 3, 1999, the Marumbi shopping mall in Sao Paulo, Brazil, was bustling with its usual weekday crowd. Inside Cinema 5, approximately 40 people had settled in to watch Fight Club, a film about violence and psychological breakdown. Among them were Herme Luisa Jatoba Vadaz, a 40-year-old psychologist, Fabiana Lobão Freitas, a 22-year-old student, and Julio Mauricio Zemaitis, a 44-year-old businessman. Unknown to them, seated in the audience was Mateus da Costa Meira, a 24-year-old medical student from a wealthy family. He had entered the theater carrying a tennis bag. Approximately 30 minutes into the film, during a scene depicting violence, Meira stood up from his seat. In the darkness of the theater, he calmly removed a 9mm Cobra M11 submachine gun from his bag. Without saying a word, he began firing indiscriminately into the crowd. The first burst of gunfire lasted only seconds, but released 29 bullets into the darkened theater. The sound of gunshots initially confused many patrons, who thought it was part of the film. This momentary hesitation proved fatal. The high-velocity rounds tore through seats and bodies alike. Panic erupted as people realized what was happening. Some crawled on the floor seeking cover while others rushed toward the exits. Meira continued firing until he was tackled by several patrons. By then, the damage was done. Herme died instantly from bullets to her head and chest. Fabiana and Julio suffered multiple gunshot wounds and died shortly after arriving at nearby hospitals. 7 others were seriously injured but survived. Police later found 160 unfired bullets in Meira's possession, enough to have killed everyone in the theater. Laurier Palace Theater fire incident. On January 9, 1927, a freezing Sunday afternoon in Montreal, Quebec, the Laurier Palace Theater was filled with approximately 800 people, most of them children under 16 years old. The theater, located in a working-class neighborhood, was showing the comedy film Get 'Em Young. Many children had been dropped off by parents for the 2 p.m. matinee, a common weekend practice. At approximately 2:15 p.m., a small fire started beneath the wooden balcony, likely from a discarded cigarette. Smoke began to rise visibly in the darkened theater, when children in the balcony noticed and began to move toward exits. The ushers initially tried to maintain maintain order by directing them back to their seats, insisting there was no danger. This fatal delay allowed the fire to spread rapidly through the aging wooden structure. Panic erupted minutes later as thick smoke filled the theater. Hundreds of children rushed toward the main exit at once. The theater had 6 exits, but only one was properly marked, and all doors opened inward, a critical design flaw that proved deadly when pressed upon by the weight of panicked children. At the eastern stairwell, the main escape route, children piled on top of each other as they tried to flee. The pressure of bodies against the doors made them impossible to open. Those at the bottom of the pile were crushed or asphyxiated within minutes. When firefighters finally broke through, they found a tangled mass of bodies on the stairs. 78 children died in the disaster, 12 from burns, the rest from being crushed or suffocated. Many were found still clutching their ticket stubs in their hands. Dream City Cinema Club, arson incident. On February 26, 1994, a small adult cinema in London's Clerkenwell district was operating illegally after hours. Dream City Cinema Club occupied the ground floor of a 4-story building on St. John Street. Inside, approximately 50 men were watching films in the darkness. The venue had no proper fire safety equipment, emergency lighting, or adequate exits. David Laurier, a 39-year-old homeless man known locally as Deaf Dave, arrived at the club that evening after being ejected because he couldn't pay the £5 entrance fee. He became enraged. Laurier walked to a nearby service station, purchased a container of petrol, and returned to the cinema around 2 a.m. Without hesitation, he poured the fuel across the entrance and ignited it. The fire spread with extraordinary speed through the venue's narrow corridors. The front entrance, now engulfed in flames, was the only way in or out of the building. Inside, patrons were initially unaware of the danger until smoke began pouring into the screening room. Panic erupted as men rushed toward the burning entrance. The lack of emergency lighting meant they were navigating through near total darkness. Those who reached the front door faced a wall of flames. Some tried to break through windows but found them barred. Within minutes, the toxic smoke had filled the entire space. Victims collapsed from smoke inhalation before they could find an escape route. Firefighters arrived quickly but found the entrance completely blocked by fire. By the time emergency services gained access, 8 men had already died from smoke inhalation. 3 more would die in hospital in the following days. The victims were found huddled together in corners, their lungs filled with toxic fumes. Palace Cinema Theatre death incident. On December 12, 2024, a small theater in Rayadurgam, Andhra Pradesh, was packed with fans eager to see Pushpa 2: The Rule, one of India's most anticipated films of the year. Among those attending the early afternoon matinee was a 35-year-old laborer from Udegalam village. The father of 4 had traveled to the Palace Cinema Theatre specifically to see the action blockbuster starring Allu Arjun. Witnesses later reported that he appeared visibly intoxicated when he entered the theater shortly before the 2 p.m. showing. He took his seat in the rear section of the auditorium, away from most other patrons. As the 3-hour film played, other audience members noticed him slumped in his chair, but assumed he was merely sleeping off his intoxication. When the film ended and lights came up around 5 p.m., the theater emptied quickly. Staff began preparing for the evening screening scheduled for 6 p.m., but did not thoroughly check each row of seats. It wasn't until a cleaner was sweeping between screenings that Marianappa's body was discovered, still seated upright in the chair where he had been throughout the film. Medical examiners later determined he had died approximately 2 hours into the screening. The combination of severe alcohol intoxication and an undiagnosed heart condition had proven fatal. Despite the discovery, theater management made the decision to continue with the evening screening as scheduled. The body remained in the theater, covered with a sheet in the back row, while new patrons filed in for the 6 p.m. show. It was only after family members arrived following notification that his body was finally removed. By then, the next screening was already underway, with audience members unaware of the death that had occurred just meters away. Cinema lift tragedy. On September 24, 2025, the PVR Escape Multiplex in Chennai's Express Avenue Mall was preparing for its morning screenings. While most theaters were still empty, Screen 4 had one occupant, Ramesh Kumar, a 39-year-old maintenance worker employed by the cinema for over 7 years. His job that morning was routine, cleaning the high ceiling panels and checking the surround sound speakers mounted near the top of the screen. At approximately 7:15 a.m., Ramesh positioned a hydraulic scissor lift beneath the main screen. The machine was designed to elevate workers safely to heights of up to 12 meters. Ramesh had used this equipment hundreds of times before. He stepped onto the metal platform and activated the control panel, rising slowly toward the ceiling. Witnesses in the projection room later reported hearing an unusual grinding noise from the lift's hydraulic system. The theater's assistant manager, who had just entered to check on progress, saw Ramesh reaching up to clean a speaker panel when something went catastrophically wrong. Without warning, the lift's safety mechanism failed. A critical hydraulic line ruptured, causing pressure to build in the remaining functional cylinder. The platform suddenly jerked upward with tremendous force. Ramesh had no time to react. His body was caught between the rising metal frame and the rigid ceiling structure. The impact was devastating. The edge of the platform compressed his chest with a force exceeding 1,000 kilograms per square inch. Medical experts later explained that this immediate pressure shattered his ribcage, driving bone fragments into his lungs and heart. Simultaneously, his head was crushed against a ceiling beam, causing catastrophic skull fracture and immediate brain hemorrhage. For several seconds, Ramesh remained conscious, experiencing excruciating pain as his internal organs were compressed. His lungs, unable to expand, could draw no breath. Blood vessels in his brain ruptured from the immense pressure. Those few moments of awareness would have been filled with unimaginable agony before oxygen deprivation to his brain mercifully rendered him unconscious. The assistant manager rushed to the emergency stop button, but it was already too late. When first responders arrived 7 minutes later, they found Ramesh's body still pinned in position, showing no vital signs. The medical team pronounced him dead at the scene, noting that death had occurred within seconds of impact from catastrophic traumatic asphyxia and massive head trauma. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.